So we're working through task 2, and we're going to go through steps 3 and 4. We're going to search for some raster data sets now to be able to add those into our project. And then we're going to build out a file geodatabase, a place to start storing and collating all the material that we're pulling into this project. So here we go. So the first thing we need to do is go grab some raster information. And similar to our search for data across the web with the vector data, here I just entered in imagery or GIS. You can also go to the similar open data locations to try to find imagery. Or if you want to find elevation data, you could search kind of more specifically there. So in this case, I searched for Louisiana, imagery, and GIS, just tossing that on there to see what I would get. And I get the LSU Atlas of GIS hosts publicly available data sets. Perfect. There's a couple others. Oh, an ortho imagery from Louisiana. That could be a good source to go look and see what's available. So there's a couple of decent results that come back at the top. And I'm going to go to this LSU Atlas. That's really what I want to be able to use. The first result back, this Atlas, has some great sources of information, which I want to be able to use. So there's imagery from 98, from 2004, from 2005. Basically gives me the opportunity to kind of walk back in time and see how things changed. So for the work that I'm doing for this project, I want to be able to compare what the city looked like in my study area prior to Hurricane Katrina and how the recovery has taken place with the buildings that are there today. So the storm happened in 2005. So I don't want to mess with this 2005 imagery because it might have been collected after the storm. Same thing with 2008, too late. So I need this 2004 imagery. So if I click that, it'll pull me into this download viewer application where I can actually see the imagery. And then it walks me through an example of how I can go get the data. And this will differ by each location and the ways that you want to download your imagery. But for this one, it's telling me just click on the map and I can then download this data. And here's the file here. So I'm going to right click and save this as. So now, similar as we did last time, I'm going to go into that project and I'm going to unzip that. I'm going to right click and extract it. Now let's go to ArcGIS Pro and add that layer into the map as well. So if any data doesn't show up in your folders list here, you can always right click and then refresh to be able to see any new content that might get added in. So let me right click and do that again to refresh that folder. And so here we go. Here's that new imagery that I just downloaded. And this is in a format called Mr. SID, which is a compression format for imagery. And there's a README, there's a text file that's associated with this for some metadata, so I could open that and read that information. Or I could just right click and add this data into the map. Or, as we've done before, I can just drag it and pull it into the map. So let me zoom into the map a little bit and I can start to see a pretty fascinating comparison between my two data sets. The vector data, which is the building outlines, and then also the imagery I just added into the map. And it's a pretty stark comparison. And let's zoom into one spot to just have a small study area for this demonstration. Let's come into this part of the neighborhood right here. So the imagery isn't that high resolution, but it still paints a pretty stark picture for this neighborhood. So again, those areas in white are my vector outlines for the buildings that are in the city today that are inhabited or that are structures. And those buildings you can see in the imagery were there prior to the storm, to Katrina. And so what we're working on is we want to now get all of this data into one location so we can start to build out this project a little bit more authoritatively. And so the next step is to build a file geodatabase, a place to store all of this information. And so I'm going to right click on my folder here and I'm going to create a new file geodatabase. So simply by right clicking, I get that option new, and I'm going to select File Geodatabase up here. And I'm going to give this a name. I called this NOLA, short for New Orleans, Lower 9, since the neighborhood we're looking at here is the Lower 9th Ward that it's referred to as. So I just built that geodatabase, but right now it's blank. And so what I want to do as part of this project is start digitizing or capturing where buildings were in the city prior to the storm. So we have some of these building footprints here, which were probably buildings that may have existed, before the storm, or there could be new construction, obviously, if these buildings were completely destroyed, which was the case in many times. But I want to go and actually outline or circle these buildings as they existed prior to the storm coming through. So we need to create a new data set to capture that information. So with that new file geodatabase, I can now right click on that and then edit or add in new types of data sets. I can create feature data sets, which are really ways to organize lots of feature classes or tables. You can think of this being kind of a category for types of information that then other feature classes or views can get stored in. So first, let's make a featured data set. And I'm going to call this houses. So we're going to store all the information related to the buildings inside of this featured data set, of which we'll have the building footprints from this data we downloaded from the New Orleans website, and we'll also have the data that we digitize. And I can then pick the coordinate system I want to store this data in. And if I pick this drop down, you can see I can actually select from the other data in the map to use those coordinate systems. And for this purpose, I'm going to actually select the other building footprints layer, so we have that in the same coordinate system. So building footprints, and you can see that it's actually using that web Mercator. Let me check some of the others to see if they're different. The SID is using the web Mercator, etc. So let's just go with go with that building footprints, and I'll hit run to create the feature data set. So the tool completed, it gave me a green arrow, green checkbox, great. And if I go back or click here to my catalog, I can then see I've got that new feature data set here, houses, which doesn't have anything in it. It's just basically a container to store related layers and feature classes inside of. So the next thing we need to create is one for the houses or the building footprints from 2004. If you remember, the imagery we grabbed was from 2004, so that's what I'm going to title it. And so within this feature data set, I can right click and then create a new feature class. And so similar to ArcGIS Online, when we created the layer, the feature class is where we're going to store all of this data. Let's give it a name. And similar to ArcGIS Online, the name should have an undercarriage and no spaces. So I'm going to call that Buildings 2004. And the alias can have a space in it. We'll have it as a polygon type. I don't want z-values stored. And I'm going to add it to the map. I can hit next. Then I can actually add in different fields if I want to. So here I'm going to type in a field called year. And rather than doing this as a date field, which stores day, time, I just want to store this as an integer. And so I want this to be a short integer just so I can put in the number of the year. I'm also going to put in here the neighborhood. And hit next. going to ask me what coordinate system or what reference I want to use for this. We're just going to go with the default because it's going to use the one from the feature data set. Hit next, and hit finish. So now that that feature class was created in the feature data set in our new geodatabase, I'm going to right click on this and I'm going to add it to the map. It looks like it was already in here, so let me remove one of these. I'm going to remove it, and then I'm going to right click and I'm going to look at the attribute table for this. So right now the attribute table is blank. We don't have any data in here, but you can see our new fields that we created. We have the year, we have the neighborhood, and if I mouse over these, it'll tell me the type of field that is. This one being text, this one being a short, so a short integer. The next thing I want to do is create a domain similar to the domain that we created in ArcGIS Online. And to do that, I can right click on the buildings layer, go to data design, and I can go to domains, I can go to fields, and I'm actually going to start from fields, and you'll see why in a second. So I'm just going to select fields, and that'll open up a new table down here. And so I get a list of all of my fields, year, neighborhood, some of the other default ones that were created. And over here, I can then double click to create a new domain. So the one that I want to create one for is for the neighborhood, because there are a number of neighborhoods in the city of New Orleans, and I don't want people just typing in any name of a neighborhood. I want them to, again, have a drop down to be able to have to select a year or to select a neighborhood. So I double click and hit add new domain. Give it a name. It's in a text field, coded value. And we give it a code and a description. And so it's funny, one thing I could have done when I set up this field is created this as a short integer, again to have those codes, but I kind of wasn't thinking through it when I created it. But I can come back here and actually change this too. So I'm going to change that to a short and then start my domain again. You can see here that one was set up as a text, so I'm going to delete that one. Short coded value, and here we go. I'm going to enter in 1 for lower 9th. I'm going to enter in a 2 for Garden District, 3 for Mid City, and a 4 for the French Quarter. After I've entered those in, make sure you come up to the Domains tab here and then hit Save. And you can see these green options should go away as it saves those domains and saves the changes to the field. So now I can change this or close that. And then I'm also going to save the changes I made to that field. So we've downloaded imagery, we've added that into the map, and we also just created a file geodatabase, created a feature data set, and created a feature class within that data set. So that's the end of this video.